Take the bus. We're buying your sister a Tesla, Dad said, without looking at me. I stood in my graduation gown, clutching a bus pass while Madison screamed over a pearl-white car wrapped in a red bow. 3 hours later, the dean paused at the microphone. And now, our youngest billionaire graduate, Caily Bennett. The arena exploded. Mom dropped her program. Dad went pale. Madison's keys hit the floor. They thought I had spent college barely surviving. They never asked what I was building at night. And when I left the stage, Dad came toward me not to apologize, but to ask for his share. Growing up, our house looked like the kind of place people slowed down to admire. White columns, black shutters, a porch swing my mother decorated for every season. Inside, though, the walls told the truth. Madison was everywhere. Her dance portraits lined the hallway. Her homecoming photo sat above the fireplace. There was even a framed picture of her holding a blue ribbon beside the pony Dad bought her one Christmas. My only photo was tucked behind a lamp. I was 7, wearing a yellow dress, standing half outside the frame. Dad called Madison his princess. Mom called me her easy child. For years, I thought those were compliments. They were excuses. Madison needed rides, lessons, dresses, trips, and constant reassurance. I needed nothing because I had learned not to ask. When I won a statewide science competition in 8th grade, Dad glanced at my trophy and said, "Good. That'll help with college." 10 minutes later, he drove across town to buy Madison flowers for saying 3 lines in a school play. That night, they took us out for ice cream. The celebration was for her. I sat in the booth watching chocolate melt down the side of my sundae while Madison reenacted her tiny scene for the 3rd time. By college, I understood the rules. Madison was meant to shine. I was meant to manage. My parents sent me a little money each month, about $5,000 over 4 years. It barely touched rent, books, food, or transportation. So I worked nights in campus security. At 2 in the morning, I studied beneath humming fluorescent lights while empty hallways flickered across a wall of monitors. The coffee tasted burned. My shoes were held together with glue near the soles. During the day, I attended classes and worked with a small software team. We were building a platform for local businesses that could not afford big marketing firms. I handled strategy, sales, and product design. We started with borrowed equipment, free meeting rooms, and whatever food we could split. Dad knew I was doing something with computers. That was all he ever asked. Once, I tried to explain our first major contract over Thanksgiving dinner. He cut into his turkey and said, "Make sure it doesn't distract you from finding a real job." Madison immediately changed the subject to a weekend trip she wanted. Everyone leaned closer. I stopped talking. By senior year, our platform had thousands of paying customers. Investors were circling. A major deal was waiting on final approval. I told no one at home, not because I wanted revenge, because being ignored had finally taught me the safest place for hope was somewhere they could not reach. The night before graduation, an email arrived. The deal might close by morning, and everything would change with it. Graduation morning began with the smell of coffee and something sweet baking in the kitchen. For one hopeful second, I thought Mom had made breakfast for me. Then I heard Madison scream. I stepped into the hallway wearing my blue dress beneath my gown and saw red ribbons scattered across the floor. Dad stood by the front door holding a set of keys. Mom was filming. Outside, in the driveway, sat a pearl-white Tesla with a bow stretched across the hood. Madison ran barefoot onto the porch. "Oh my God, is that mine?" Mom laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone. I looked at the clock. "We need to leave in 20 minutes, I said. Dad barely glanced at me. "Take the bus. We're buying your sister a Tesla." The words landed so cleanly that, for a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "You're still coming to the ceremony." "Right." Mom lowered her phone just enough to offer me a soft, practiced smile. "Of course. Honey, we'll come after the pictures." Madison opened the driver's door and slid into the seat. She never looked at me. Dad walked past with the charging cable over one shoulder. "You're the independent one," he said. "You'll figure it out." So I did. I carried my gown to the bus stop and sat on a cold metal bench while cars passed with families inside. Through the window of our house, I could still see flashes from Mom's camera. When the bus arrived, the driver looked at my cap and smiled. Big day, I swallowed. Supposed to be. The seat smelled like rubber and old rain. My gown scratched my neck. Every bump in the road made the tassel tap against my cheek. Halfway to campus. My phone buzzed. The deal had closed. I opened the message twice to make sure I understood it. The company had been valued in the billions. My shares were worth more than $1 billion. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I watched my reflection tremble in the glass and thought about how badly I still wanted 2 empty seats filled. At the arena. They stayed empty until minutes before the ceremony. Then my family rushed in together. Madison was still holding the Tesla keys. Mom waved toward me as if nothing had happened. Dad frowned at the distance between their seats and the stage. They had driven there in the new car, all 3 of them. That was when I finally understood. They had never needed me to take the bus. They had only needed me to accept where they had placed me. But while Dad complained about the seats, a staff member approached me and whispered that the dean had changed the program for me. The staff member led me down a hallway behind the arena, where thousands of voices faded into the hum of air vents. The moment the door closed, my knees weakened. I stepped into an empty restroom, set my cap beside the sink, and stared at myself beneath harsh white lights. My makeup was neat, except for one dark line beneath my left eye. I wiped it away, but another tear followed. I wasn't crying over the car. I was crying because some part of me had still believed they might choose me, even after the missed competitions, even after the empty calls, even after Dad told me to take the bus. A knock sounded at the door. Caily. It was Richard Collins, the mentor who had helped our software team negotiate its first real contract. He had driven 2 hours to attend because I had once mentioned that nobody from my family understood what I had built. I opened the door. He took one look at my face and handed me a handkerchief. No questions, he said. Just breathe. I pressed the cloth beneath my eyes. They came, I whispered, but somehow that made it worse. Richard nodded toward the arena. Then stop measuring this day by who showed up late, before I could answer. The dean joined us. He held a printed announcement and looked nervous. The acquisition was released publicly this morning, he said. The board would like to recognize you before the final degrees are awarded. My stomach tightened. How much are you planning to say? Only what is public. Your age. Your role as a founder, the company valuation, the estimated value of your shares. I imagined Dad's face, Mom's tears, Madison clutching those keys. For one ugly second, I wanted them humiliated. Then shame washed over me. I don't want this to look like revenge. Richard's voice stayed calm. Being seen is not revenge. The dean waited. I looked into the mirror again. My eyes were red, but they no longer looked small. Do it, I said. When I returned to the graduates' line, Mom was standing near the rope barrier. There you are, she whispered. We need pictures afterward, so try not to cry. Madison leaned around her, lifting the Tesla key. Isn't it gorgeous? Dad checked his watch. Have you found a real job yet? I looked at him. Yes. What does it pay? The line moved before I could answer. He had asked about the salary, not the work, not the company, not the 3 years of nights that had brought me here. I walked toward my seat and felt something inside me settle. The ceremony began. Names echoed through the arena. Families cheered, cameras flashed. Then, the final graduate crossed the stage, and the dean returned to the microphone. Before we conclude, he said, we have one extraordinary achievement to recognize. Behind me. Madison's keys jingled. Dad's phone lit his face. Then the dean opened the announcement and said my name. The dean's voice carried across the arena. Caily Bennett didn't just complete her degree with honors. During her final 3 years here, she helped build a software platform now used by thousands of small businesses. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Dad finally looked up from his phone. The dean continued. This morning, a major investment agreement was made public. The company is now valued at several $billions. Based on her ownership stake, Caily becomes the youngest billionaire graduate in this university's history. For 1 second, the arena went silent. Then it exploded. People stood. My classmates turned toward me. Professors clapped above their heads. My parents dropped their programs. Mom's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dad's face lost all color. Madison stopped spinning her Tesla keys, and they slipped from her fingers onto the concrete floor. I walked toward the stage through a wall of noise. Every step felt unreal. The gown still scratched my neck, my shoes still pinched. I was still the girl who had ridden the bus alone that morning. But now they were looking at me. The dean shook my hand and handed me a glass award. I leaned toward the microphone. "I want to thank the people who believed in the work before it had a valuation," I said. "My professors, my team, the night staff who let me study between shifts, and every small business owner who trusted us when we were working from borrowed rooms." I did not mention my family. That silence said enough. After the ceremony, Mom reached me first. She wrapped both arms around me and cried against my shoulder. "My brilliant girl," she said. "I always knew you were special." I stepped back. Dad moved in. "Why didn't you tell us?" he demanded. "Something this significant affects the whole family." Madison stared at me. "You're actually a billionaire." "My shares are valued that way," I said. "That isn't the same as cash." Dad waved that aside. "We need to discuss structure, taxes, long-term planning. I have contacts. I can help you manage this." He sounded exactly like he did when reviewing a property deal. Mom touched my arm. "We should celebrate tonight. Just family." Madison lifted her keys from the floor. "I've been thinking about launching a fashion brand," she said. "This could be perfect timing." There it was. Not an apology, not a question about what I had built, a claim. I asked them to follow me into a quiet reception room near the lobby. The door closed behind us, shutting out the crowd. Dad crossed his arms. "You embarrassed us out there." I stared at him. "Did you know what I was building?" He said nothing. "Did you know where I worked at night?" Mom looked down. "Did either of you know how I got here this morning?" Dad's jaw tightened. "Don't turn a transportation issue into a family crisis." I looked at the Tesla key in Madison's hand. "You had a car. You had 3 seats. You made me take the bus because her surprise mattered more than my graduation." Mom began to cry again. "We were coming later." "You came for the picture." Dad stepped closer. "We raised you to be independent." The sentence landed harder than I expected. I felt 22 years of silence gather behind my ribs. "You didn't make me independent," I said. "You made me alone. I did the rest. Nobody moved. Then I gave them the rules. They would not tell people they funded my company. They would not use my name to raise money. And Madison would not receive cash, a title, or a business simply because she was my sister." Madison's face hardened. "You help strangers. I help people who do the work." Dad pointed toward me. "Remember who your family is." I opened the door. "I do. That's why this hurts." "And that's why it ends here." I walked out with Richard waiting beside the lobby. Behind me, Dad called my name. I didn't turn around. I thought that was the end. By sunrise, he was already telling people my billion-dollar company had been built with his money. By breakfast, Dad's version of the story was already moving faster than the truth. He told relatives he had financed my education, coached me through every business decision, and quietly backed the company from the beginning. Mom posted a graduation photo with a caption about everything we sacrificed as parents. For a few hours, I wanted to answer with anger. Instead, I opened the payments and bills from college. My parents had sent me about $5,000 over 4 years. The rest had come from scholarships, loans, night shifts, and money I earned building the platform. I transferred the full amount back to them. In the note, I wrote, "College support repaid in full." Dad called within minutes. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means you can stop calling my company a family investment. You're being childish." "No," I said. "I'm closing the account." Then I hung up. My team released a simple founder profile the next morning. No attacks, no family secrets, just facts. It listed my scholarship, my campus job, the borrowed meeting rooms, the first customers, the team members, and the investors who had actually taken risks with us. Dad's name was nowhere on it. The truth did what anger could not. His story collapsed on its own. A week later, Madison emailed me a business plan for her fashion brand. She wanted $300,000, a full marketing team, and an executive title. She had no sales, no supplier agreements, and no money of her own invested. I sent it through the same review process every applicant faced. It was rejected. Mom called crying. "She's your sister. That is why I'm offering her something real." I offered Madison a place in a 6-month entrepreneurship program. She would work inside a small business, build a product sample, invest her own savings, and present again. Dad called it humiliating. I called it a beginning. Then the graduation clip went viral. Not because I was a billionaire, because the camera had caught Mom's program slipping from her hands and Madison's keys hitting the floor. Reporters wanted interviews about family betrayal. I refused everyone. I would not turn my pain into entertainment for strangers. But I did use the attention. I announced a foundation for students who worked through college without dependable family support. It covered tuition gaps, books, emergency expenses, and transportation. Our first transportation grant paid for bus passes. The old bus pass from my graduation morning was framed in the foundation office, not as a symbol of humiliation, as proof that being left behind did not mean staying behind. 3 months later, Madison sold the Tesla. She sent me the enrollment receipt for the entrepreneurship program and one sentence: "I want to learn what I can build before Dad buys it for me." It was not an apology, but it was the first honest thing she had ever given me. I did not move her application forward. I did not call the program director. I let her stand in line like everyone else. She failed her first presentation. For once, nobody rescued her. She revised it and tried again. Dad stopped speaking to both of us for several months, without money or praise to control the room. He had nothing to say. Mom kept sending soft messages that explained more than they apologized. I answered once: "You can come back into my life when you stop defending the harm." Then I bought a used SUV. No red bow, no camera, no cheering family. Just worn leather, a faint pine air freshener, and my hands around the steering wheel. At our first scholarship ceremony, a student named Hannah stepped onto the stage and said our program meant she would not have to graduate alone. I looked at the framed bus pass beside the podium. That morning, it had felt like proof that no one chose me. Now it meant something else. I had chosen what came next. My parents could buy Madison a Tesla, but not the right to claim my work, my money, or my future. For years, I thought winning meant making them regret overlooking me. I was wrong. Winning meant no longer needing their regret. Love does not ask you to disappear so someone else can shine. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. Sometimes, it is the first honest form of self-respect. If you have ever been treated like the second choice, share your story in the comments. Subscribe for more stories. You are not hard to love. You may be asking the wrong people.